very busy time in the NFL. A bit of a quiet one for the Chiefs so far, though. NFL free agency has been the gift that we all needed. It has given us hashtag content. It has given us something to refresh on Twitter for as we sit at home in quarantine and wait for any little morsels of news to come down TweetDeck. That's what I've been doing, and I imagine to at least some extent that's what Ryan Tracy has been doing. He joins us now. You can listen to him on the Locked On Chiefs podcast. You can check out Rogue Analytics and RGR Football. Follow him on Twitter at Ryan Tracy NFL. Ryan, how is your life gone the last week or so? Anything new?
You know, a couple of things, not a whole lot from the way that I normally work, but it seems the more screens that I hook up to more instances of TweetDeck, the less information that I actually need to see.
100%. And also, I would say that there's like a 1-to-1 correlation of TweetDeck running to me being a little bit stressed out. So I'm not sure that's good for us. But it has been busy, and there's some Chiefs stuff, obviously, and then also just some NFL stuff I want to talk to you about. But with the moves we've seen from the Chiefs so far, specifically not having a resolution on Chris Jones just yet, also not having resolution on a couple other guys, but Chris Jones first. Has anything changed for you in your expectations for what the Chiefs are trying to do with Chris Jones?
I don't know that my expectations have changed. The timeline certainly has. I honestly thought that there would be a deal done by this point. I think the Buckner trade really threw everything out of whack. And I think maybe that takes you back a step and says, well, okay, if we're not going to get a trade value that we really like, let's double down and see if we can make the market help us get something done in terms of an extension. So I think it's much more 50-50 than it was a week ago.
And I think the process of that is really smart also, because the Chiefs have had leverage at various points of this. Obviously, no deal done yet, either last offseason or this one so far. So the fact that that's sort of in a holding pattern doesn't like freak me out. What is even more strange is I definitely thought we would know about Sammy Watkins and about Laurent Duvernay-Tardif one way or another by now, because that one the Chiefs can kind of decide on unless they are holding out for a restructuring for either of those guys. Have you been surprised about there not being any resolution there to this point?
Yeah, I am more surprised about that because, like you said, it is their decision to make at this point. Unless, and I've had 3 people ask me this, I think it's pretty far-fetched. But given the strangeness of the wide receiver trades that have gone on in the league to this point, I hear more and more people asking me about, is there a possibility that there's a trade partner out there for Sammy Watkins? And despite a couple of instances that might make you feel like the NFL might be farther down on this wide receiver draft class than a lot of people are, I still don't think that contract allows you to really get him moved for any kind of value in return. So I think it is about either trying to restructure or they're just going to have to come to the conclusion that it's not going to work, and we will eventually see him released.
What about the decision to not retain Stefan Wisniewski? He got 2 years, a little under $3 million with Pittsburgh. That number was really surprising to me. But there was also a little bit from Adam Kaplan, who I believe had the deal first, talking about him wanting to start and all of that. I know, because you've tweeted about this today already too, but I know that it's hard for the Chiefs to do anything in terms of additions whenever a lot is still to be determined. But if you could have swapped out 2 years, $2.85 million from Wisniewski for LDT's deal, is that not a trade you would have made?
I think that's reasonable. I think that LDT had a down year. I don't think that necessarily equates to him not being able to play at a higher level again. But the salary versus performance, I can understand that concept. I think the bigger issue is I view Wiz as exactly what he was last season, a guy that has the experience and still enough athleticism to play the game as a backup in limited games, but expecting him to play 16 if you're a playoff team, 18, 19 games, I think that's a pretty good stretch. So I agree. He can want to start all he wants. I would have only signed him as a backup as well, or at least competition. Yeah. But that trade-off, I think, is very interesting. And I think it all comes back to, we don't know the exact numbers. Even the NFLPA is still not down to the dollar in terms of estimating the cap space. But it occurs to me, if you really wanted to make that or the Mike Pennell signing that I still expect happen, you could have done more in terms of moving Frank Clark's numbers around to get you that space to do right now in the first, second wave.
You mentioned something about LDT that I was literally, I was kicking this around this morning and thinking, I haven't really heard anyone make this argument yet, and you just did. That listen, no one is arguing that LDT was great last year, but you make the case that you're not willing to completely bail on him being able to return to a higher level. And I mean, I would think as his contract goes, you would hope to even reach a higher level than he has to this point. But you look at him from last year, then you look at the full context, and then also his salary cap number right now. How optimistic or pessimistic are you allowing yourself to be on LDT?
I'm a little over 50-50. It's certainly not a given, but I do feel like sometimes injuries that end seasons have a tendency to last beyond just that following year. I think we saw that with Justin Houston a little bit. I think we've seen that over the years with some other players where year two removed from a substantial injury sometimes allows a player to rebound. And in the time that we've seen him play, I think that might just be pushing it a little bit. So I would hope that another offseason, healthy, isolated and resting, hopefully, and not actually performing medicine anywhere,
right,
might actually give him a shot to recover more fully and be ready for a rebound this season.
So if I'm letting you kind of make the calls in across the offensive line, Austin Ryder's not a huge number, but they could free up pretty much his whole salary if they wanted to move on from him. They retain Andrew Wiley as a super cheap exclusive rights free agent. You would hold on to LDT, it sounds like. Then obviously the tackles are locked in there. Would that be your starting five?
It would be reluctantly at this point. I would probably be, requesting a restructure out of LDT. I don't think I would just stand pat where it sits. But I think right now, until you know what you can do, you've moved on from Cam Irving, so you've lost the guard option there. You've moved on from Wiz, you lost the guard option there. At this point, unless something comes from the two big elephants in Sammy and Chris Jones, you only have 5 draft selections. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can go make a huge investment in that offensive line group. So at this point, I can't see jettisoning talent, even if it's not performing up to your request, at this point, unless you know that you can replace it.
Who else across the market right now do you look at and say, maybe that's someone that you move in terms of freeing up some space, or even somebody who is on the market now, either a former Chief or not? Like I'm thinking about Bashad Breeland in terms of a guy that's just sitting out there still, but you can look at Dan Sorensen in terms of a guy with the cap hit that you could free up some space. Is there anything that right now you're just like pulling your hair out, just going, how have they not done this thing yet?
No, I'm not anticipating. I'm not like chomping at the bit for it or anything. I thought Breeland would have had offers by now, so that is a little bit surprising to me. But really, in order to do anything of any significance, other than signing, the bottom 8 players to a 53-man or something like that, you have to address the 2 big deals first. Yeah. And that's kind of the waiting game. And unfortunately, whether it's waiting for trade partners or waiting to restructure or waiting for a new contract, whatever is causing the wait right now, they're missing out on some opportunities. The Andrews Pete, evidently they were going after a very good guard at that point, and they weren't able to compete monetarily because they don't have these other things squared away. And until they do, they're not going to be able to make those moves. So you're going to rely on things like Mike Pennell at his age, probably not having a huge market. He should be there for a while. I know they've had discussions and contacts, so I think both parties are interested in him coming back, and maybe that allows you to wait on him. Maybe there are a couple other options out there. We just have to kind of see, and we've got to get some kind of traction on one deal or another.
Specifically on the Andrews Pete thing, because I saw that pop up earlier today that the Chiefs were interested there. I don't have super hot takes on Andrews Pete, although I have seen some sort of negative readings of last season, and then even some Saints fans not thrilled about it. I don't need to put all my eggs in that basket, but it's also 5 years and almost $60 million. I was surprised that the Chiefs would have even been sniffing around that price range for another offensive lineman. Were you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't say that I think they were actually sniffing at that level. I think they showed some mild interest. I wouldn't say that it would be for that length. and I doubt it was anywhere near that kind of money, and that's obviously why they lost out in the deal.
Sure.
But I do think he's a player that has surpassed my expectations of him athletically coming out of the draft and has grown into his role. I'm just not certain it was the greatest fit ever. You know, when you look at the athletic abilities of guys like Mitch Morse and LDT and recent draftees in that group, they can all move pretty well. And that's not something that I would really define Pete as. I'd call him a little bit more of a power guy, a little bit more along the Wiley line.
Interesting. Yeah, that also makes sense as an eyebrow raiser, I suppose. Outside of that, whenever you look at, again, the market right now, and then just sort of this point that we're in where everything's very much in flux, the Chiefs haven't been able to do anything really, and other than, Chad Henne, he's back. But they haven't really been able to do anything super impactful, and the draft is still a ways away. What worries you right now about where the Chiefs stand?
What worries me is that the draft market for Chris Jones is drying up. And if you get yourself in a position where you can't move him for substantial, and I do still expect substantial draft capital, and you're in a situation that it seems that they're in where the numbers are so far apart on extension, that you're looking at what I think is the worst case scenario, and that is Chris Jones playing 2020 in Kansas City on the tag. And that helps no one on either side of that. It cripples them in terms of being able to do anything in free agency. It limits any kind of capital that they'd be able to gain in the draft, because they'll expect then, if they can get a partner, to have to trade down out of 32 to try and fill some more of the holes on the roster. And while generally the second and third round are always good places to pick, I think it's missing out on some things and some guys that they definitely like that could be bigger role players rather than developmental prospects. So there's a lot to be concerned about at this point.
What about also, and I don't want to just force you to talk about the corners, but I also want to talk about the corners. Kendall Fuller goes and gets paid by Washington. And like you said, you expected a bigger market for Bashaud Breeland. Maybe he's holding out for something. I have no idea. Everything is weird throughout the world right now, so maybe the NFL free agency has some hitches in it right now also. But whenever you look at the cornerback spot, are you expecting the Chiefs to eventually poke around at another veteran value? Do you think that's going to be priority one going into the draft? How do you see that playing out?
I think both, to tell you the truth. I think they have to get young talent in the draft, especially if they can't trade out of 32. They have to look at that position as one of their top priorities. I think the class kind of lends itself to that as well. But also, you have to have some kind of veteran leadership in the room.
Yeah.
I didn't think – I had estimated Chris Harris might go for around 8 to 9. He ended up getting 10, which may have just priced him out. I know he made comments that the Chiefs had looked at it, but they just didn't have a spot. And again, that goes back to the Watkins and Jones thing. But that's the kind of player that you got to at least have in the room, even if he's not the top dog.
Right.
So I do expect some kind of veteran signing at some level. I would say more so than you got out of Mo Claiborne, but maybe not as much as Breeland. Yeah. And if Breeland is holding out and doesn't get what he's looking for, there's always a chance he can come back.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit, I was surprised. I was impressed, I guess I would say, with Breeland last year. And look, I don't want to try to be like isolationist in terms of, they won the Super Bowl, let's keep everything exactly as it is, because every other team is trying to improve right now. But if you give me that option of bringing Breeland back, I would be perfectly happy with that. And then, like you said, the draft class makes sense. So is that a path you'd follow? And then can you expand a little bit on what you're looking at in terms of the draft class making sense there?
Sure. I agree with you. I think Breeland especially, I thought he played up to my expectations. I was pretty high on him the first time when he showed up to camp for a day.
Right.
And didn't end up signing.
So weird. So strange.
And if you can get him for an affordable price, that when you project out whatever's going to happen with your two big numbers here, if you think you can do that and he's the elder statesman in the room, I think you're in good shape. The draft class is really interesting because you'll hear non-team analysts talk a lot about how deep it is at cornerback. And the more and more you hear from people who actually speak to the teams, the less and less that seems to be true. I actually feel that the bulk of them that are guys that you could plug in and allow to start, I don't think they're day one starters. I think they're pushing a little bit. I think there's going to be 4 or 5 that are going to be available there at the top of the second round that you could fit into the Chiefs scheme. My big question is, there's not a ton of super long speed and size. There's very few actually that have both. And I think when you look at what Spags wants to do, they ended up playing, I think it was just over 53% man last year. In my gut, I think Spags wants to play more zone. So I think that when you look at the bigger cover 3, like Seattle prototype, big long guys, that might fit into where they're going more so than we expect after what we saw last season. So I think that opens up the draft class as well. Guys like Javon Diggs out of Alabama, I just did a review on him, and I think he's got enough of both pieces, might be a good fit. Guys that have fallen down like Christian Fulton, didn't get the performance his senior year that he did his junior year. I think those are both guys that are versatile enough that might actually be there at the top of the second at 32 or whatever that Spags might actually like.
I'm going to completely follow this rabbit trail, but what makes you think that Spagnuolo would like to play more zone, out of curiosity?
Because I saw when you want to be able to disguise what you're doing at the rover spot, if you want to let Tyrann Mathieu be as much as he can be, being able to throw it off is important.
Yeah.
And so you have to have guys that don't have to bail and line up 9 yards off their guy, 3.5 seconds before. You got to have guys that have played both systems, can play pattern match, can do more of the advanced things mentally, even if they don't have the extreme skill set. And I think that allows you to compensate for Juan Thornhill, who may not be ready to go extremely, supposedly going to be ready at camp, but that doesn't mean that he's ready to go week 1.
Mm-hmm.
And now without Fuller, you're talking about Armani Watts playing significant snaps. You have to be able to protect some of that, and I think the disguise is going to be a big deal. And that leads me back to Spags, going back to what he had done in years past was playing a little bit more zone so that he can kind of move pieces around.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that's great. I haven't heard anybody else talk about that yet. But that's what you're here for. You're here not just to follow Rabbit Trail. You are making the rabbit trail, and then I'm following you down it. It's Ryan Tracy. You can listen to him across everything. We just follow him on Twitter at Ryan Tracy NFL. What about the other stuff that's happened in the NFL so far? We'll have many times to talk lots and lots of Chiefs. But as you look at things like Brady leaving New England and going to Tampa Bay, do you have a gut reaction to that? And then what do you think that ends up looking like for Tampa and then also specifically for the Chiefs, New England?
I think I was a little surprised that it ended up being Tampa just because what Bruce Arians has wanted to do historically doesn't seem to fit with the arm that's attached to number 12. So I was a little surprised by that. But when I heard about the details that, fully guaranteed, he can't be traded or tagged, this makes the teams that might have been interested in a deal like that come down and get pretty narrow.
Yeah.
So then it tells me that there was probably only an option or two. And what I had thought is thinking outside the box, maybe he's a guy that wants a career in some kind of media after his football career. So I thought LA might be the better destination for longer term goals, but clearly I think staying on the East Coast, staying there probably helps what he wants for a family life, and more power to him. Welcome to the NFC and good riddance as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. What do you think it ends up looking like for New England? Because Tampa, we can all watch from afar and just go, wow, this is weird. Look at him playing with a pirate flag on the side of his helmet. This is very strange. But when you look at New England and what you saw from them last year, with the quarterback position now also being in flux, what does that look like?
For me, I think it's going to be a paradigm change if it all works out the way that they want it. I think they may have realized a stand-back, statuesque, throw from the pocket quarterback is not where the NFL is going.
Mm-hmm.
We're already there beyond that. And I think there's a number of guys that have some mobility and have athleticism that I think maybe Little McDaniel, but definitely Bill Belichick is going to be looking for. So I think you might see the whole thing kind of switch. And does that help guys like N'Keal Harry? Does it help other acquisitions that we don't even know about them making yet? Maybe they're going to get more target help there. I'm very interested to see what they do at the tight end position. I think that this might be a significant switch in what we've seen from New England in years past to what 2020 is going to look like.
Yeah, I think you're right. Is there a quarterback on the market that you think makes the most sense for New England? If I make you grab a crystal ball, do you look? We make fun of the fact that Jarrett Stidham is currently the Patriots starting quarterback, but if you're going to go for some sort of total paradigm shift, I don't know. You can make an argument for a lot of guys. I think. Does somebody make the most sense to you?
One guy that stands out to me because he is what I feel is a Belichick type. The guy just wins. Doesn't matter what he has to go through. I think Jalen Hurts might be a guy that fits there really well. And
interesting.
Weapon.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, okay. All right, sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting you by my exclamation of how interesting that was, but go on.
Well, I mean, that changes your whole offense, I think. And I think it's something value-wise from where they are in terms of draft capital. I think they can get that done. I think it gives McDaniel something new to scheme up that is a quarterback that you've shown can vary from his system, can learn, can adapt, has the athleticism to be an X factor. I really like that fit, and I like that underdog bid myself just as a prospect.
So there was a whole story about Jalen Hurts and why he chose Alabama, and the reason why Nick Saban was extremely interested in him. From everything I've read, he personality-wise is Nick Saban, and Nick Saban and Bill Belichick personality-wise are very similar.
The same person, yeah.
And so those two had a really good relationship because they thought the same way, they clicked the same way. Personality-wise, I think that's I can see Bill Belichick talking to Jalen Hurts and just falling in love with him.
Yeah, he calls Saban.
Yes.
Saban says you'll love him. He talks to Hurts. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that might be a match made in heaven.
Yeah, okay, that's very good. I like that a lot. I mean, I might hate it ultimately, but I like your thought process on it. What about for the Chargers? Rivers goes to Indy. I don't know how you feel about how that's going to go. It's a 1-year deal right now. Well, I don't know. But right now, it sounds like the Chargers are going to not add another veteran. Tyrod Taylor is there. Seems like they're going to draft a quarterback. What do you make of the situation that the Chargers are in?
I think it's a little precarious. I think you can say that Tyrod can hold things down, but you got to hit this correctly.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a question about, can you get in a position to get the guy that you feel is the best fit that can do what you need him to do? You just lost Melvin Gordon. You still have Eckler, so you have some support, at least in the backfield for him. You need to add a few more weapons, but there are a couple of guys that are interesting. I kind of feel that if you're not trying to change your offense, I mean, the complete opposite of New England, if you're trying to stick with things that are a little bit similar and you want to make sure that you maintain a run game, why not take a chance on Herbert? That might be the guy that they're looking to get and kind of keep him on the West Coast, keep him in a little bit of familiarity. And from everything we saw from the Senior Bowl, he's a kid that I think has kind of stepped out of his college reputation. Might be a great fit over there.
Another team, we're kind of just doing a tour of relevance for the Chiefs, but the Titans were relevant this year in a very big way in the AFC. They give a ton of money to Tannehill, Derrick Henry, franchise tagged. What did you make of the choices that have happened so far in Tennessee?
Yeah, I think that is an old school football coach trying his best to maintain what he likes. And personally, you know how I feel about the run game. I think that's great. I think it's very interesting, too, that they were able to get it done. I didn't think that combination of tag and deal was going to actually come through. So that gives you the building. Can you make the offense more explosive in the pass game? Can you give A.J. Brown somebody to draw some coverage on him?
Yeah.
Maybe decent for the rest of the AFC eventually. And then you come back, and you can always pound it down people's faces. And I think it's very interesting, when you look at what happened in Denver, now it's not just speed with Lindsey. It's Gordon, too, for 10 games anyway.
Right.
And it looks like the pendulum is swinging a little bit farther back, at least in the AFC West. You have them. You have Josh Jones. There's going to be more running attack to try to go away from Pat Mahomes and try to take advantage of a run defense that, they swole up, but they've lost a couple of guys. So you have to be able to stop the run still.
Well, Ryan, you started talking about running the football, so I legally have to hang up on you now. Thank you for joining us up until that point, but now my propaganda machine has had a hole poked in it, and I can't have that. So if you need more of all of that from Ryan, you can follow him on Twitter at Ryan Tracy NFL. There are too many things in the Twitter bio to give you all the links for, but check out the Locked On Chiefs podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Ryan Tracy NFL, RGR Football on YouTube, another great resource. So follow him on Twitter at Ryan Tracy NFL. And you'll get everything that Ryan's doing. Ryan, thank you again. Enjoy hiding out in the mountains, and I'll talk to you whenever society reforms.
Yes, you guys be good. Keep the glass between you. Stay safe.
Thanks, Ryan. I do that all the time, actually, here. Beards is not allowed within 10 feet of me.